And with me today, I have the amazing Alex Poe, who is a meditation coach, a yoga instructor, and educational consultant with a profound journey of resilience, transformation, and spiritual awakening. Once struggling with self-gaslighting, bullying, and the depths of depression, Alex's path has led him to extraordinary healing practices and insights that now guide so many others. After battling physical and emotional pain, including years with a locked knee and inner turmoil, Alex embarks on a profound healing journey. His story brings light to the transformative power of meditation, which eventually led him to Plum Village, where he experienced peace, minor miracles, and a renewed sense of purpose under the teachings of Zen master Thích Nhất Hạnh. Today, Alex combines his passion for spiritual growth and education by helping others through meditation, breathwork, and yoga, and advocates for bringing emotional and spiritual well-being into schools. His mantra, I am in perfect health, and his work with the subconscious mind highlight the depths of his journey, inspiring others to move from victim to victor. So welcome to the show, Alex. It's such an honor to have you here today.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, brilliant. So it'd be great for you to share your personal story with myself and my listeners from experiencing self-gaslighting and bullying to finding your healing journey.
Yeah, well, it's difficult actually. I was just listening to a Plum Village teaching yesterday about the absence of beginnings and endings. It's quite difficult to know where to begin the story, but
Mm.
yeah, I guess I found my experience of school to be quite difficult as a child, particularly primary school. Um, and yeah, in the end, I suppose that led to um, well, various dynamics in my life and getting to a point of depression and really consciously at the age of around 30. But in hindsight, once I started therapy, seeing that actually it had been going on for a long time. But I guess it had been difficult to acknowledge because I'm such a privileged person in society.
Mm.
Um, just being sort of, well, born in the global north, being male, being white, middle class, sort of born into sort of the really top sort of privileged position, I suppose. It
Mm.
was then very difficult to acknowledge or admit or say that I was suffering with depression because it felt like, well, none of the conditions for depression seemed to be present in my life. So why is this happening? And that, of course, made things worse. Um, and it led me to really question, okay, so ask that question, how has it come to this, I suppose. And that started me on a journey of looking at, okay, so what are the conditions for depression and anxiety? And yeah, I guess I was already teaching at that stage, and I was trying in education and teaching to do as much good as possible and to focus on happiness a lot with my students. Um, but I wasn't really feeding myself. So I was trying to do as much good in the world. And I think I was just trying to unconsciously heal the aspects of my own childhood that have caused suffering. And then eventually just constantly with this, I mean, it was good, it was well intended, but as I say, I wasn't nourishing myself properly. And eventually I got to a place of burnout where I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to quit my career now. And so that was at the end, sort of fast forwarding a bit, that was at the end of 2022 when I sort of stepped out of education after um, 15 years from teacher to head teacher. And I was just like, this isn't working for me. And so I decided to take 6 months off at the beginning of 2023. And I just rested for a couple of months. And then I went on this retreat to Plum Village. I'd already been meditating for several years, and I could sense that there was something in it which was good for me and was kept bringing me back, even though for quite a long time I would sort of go in and out of the practice and not do it regularly, and um, yeah, just lack commitment to it. And then so I had that retreat in the beginning of 2023, and yeah, minor miracles really. It was just so many things kept on happening, and I was like, I can't sort of explain this. And that's when I kind of really got into understanding. We had a little cut out there. Also, I can't hear you now, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. So yeah, so we were talking about just kind of you trying to understand, what was happening after you quit your career. I mean, just to actually, quit your career like that as well. That's quite a big step, and it just makes me think that, you wasn't feeling right, in order to do that because again, I just feel like it's a big risk to take to actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big risk, and a lot of people since I done said, "Oh, that's so brave of you," and I'm like, well, was it brave or was it desperate? I was taking an antidepressant every evening, and I was taking a lot of anti-anxiety pills each day just to try and get to sleep.
Wow.
And I just got to the point where I go back to the doctor and say, look, this is what I'm doing. I didn't feel that I was taking the anti-anxiety pills that much was right. Although I had been advised that some people take them several times throughout the day. But I'd get home from work and just absolutely frazzled, and I'd be sort of jumping around at home trying to get the energy out of my body. And then, yeah, I'd ended up taking sort of 4 or 5 of these things to try and get some sleep. So I went back to the doctor, and he recommended taking an extra antidepressant each morning in addition to the one in the evening, and then continuing with the anti-anxiety pills, but not so much, just one half. And if it doesn't work enough, then another half. And I was just thinking, this is crazy, isn't it? I'm going to continue to medicate myself in order to be able to cope in a job which just isn't lining up with my values. Basically, I don't feel like I'm actually doing anything really meaningful here. I knew I was helping, and the feedback in my workplace was very positive. But for me, it was just like I can't continue to work like this. And also, it's very sad, but a very good friend of mine died nearly 3 years ago in this month, and you just think. And that was very quick and sudden. So you think, well, okay, things can change in a matter of a week.
Mm,
So am I going to continue to live my life like this, or am I going to try and do something different? And so it's kind of a way of recognizing our mortality and to live now, and also to honor my friend and say, okay, well, I'm not going to plow ahead with something that's not serving me, and of course, limiting my ability to serve others as well.
wow, yeah, no, 100%. And so from your perspective, why might someone in your position struggle with depression?
Um, hmm. This is such a big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, I think two of the things I've identified, two of the themes I've identified, which I'm writing about in my book, and that's obviously a book's quite a big project. So try and summarize is quite quite challenging. But one of them is what I would call unintentional emotional neglect,
Mm, okay.
and the other one, which is a part of that, is performance-based value.
Mm,
And so what I mean by unintentional emotional neglect is just not having space to experience your emotions,
yeah.
um, caused by a lot of reasons, normally best intentions. People don't want us to feel sad.
Mm,
Um, Friends, family, teachers, they don't want you to feel sad. So when the moment of sadness comes along, normally you're told, not directly, but in some form or another, to correct that. And you end up getting this message that, okay, I'm wrong. And it might be something like, there's an example recently, a friend was telling me about her son was working on a project, and he was getting frustrated because he couldn't get it right. So she said, it doesn't have to be perfect, which is, of course, a lovely thing to say. But in the moment, what the child or the young person is dealing with is incredible frustration. And that's the only reality which is relevant at that point. When we've got an emotion, that's the only thing that really matters. And I believe actually that we talk a lot about mental health. It's emotional health, which we should say is even more important, because obviously they're closely linked. But everything's really about how we feel. Nothing else. If we felt okay, if we felt at peace, then none of the other circumstances would matter. So how we feel is the experience which is most relevant to us, because it's physical. An emotional experience has a physical representation in the body. And because we get trained so much to think, we often repress our body and we don't connect with it.
Yeah.
But if you go back to that person's experience of being frustrated and being told it doesn't have to be perfect, what's happening there unintentionally is your emotion's slightly incorrect. There's an incorrectness about your emotion, that you shouldn't necessarily have this right now because there's something wrong with your thought process, which is that it has to be perfect. And of course it's true. So we want to have the thought process of it doesn't have to be perfect in order to be able to give ourselves some grace and peace in the project. But as a child, as a young person, when your emotion is strong, you can't really access that being corrected. And all you're really unconsciously learning is, oh, I'm wrong. And my feeling that I've got here doesn't matter because that hasn't been acknowledged. Yeah. And I see that everywhere now. Now that I've become aware of it, I see us constantly trying to move away from the difficult emotion. And it's completely natural, but it does leave the unconscious mind learning, my feelings don't matter, therefore I don't matter. This person's not that interested in my feelings. And when it comes to depression, that sense of not mattering and being isolated and being separated, which I think is probably like our original trauma, original fear, comes from separation. And you see that theme in various spiritual texts from different parts of the world and different spiritual traditions, that connection is what heals and separation is what makes us suffer. So the unconscious learning that my emotions don't matter and therefore I don't matter is part of it. And then that's the unintentional emotional neglect. And the performance-based value is that we see very much in schools, but also in parents, again, with best of intentions, we get excited when children do things well. And there is a joy in seeing children learn, and there's a joy in observing, watching high performance. That's why people love watching sport and Strictly Come Dancing and things. It's lovely to see things done well, and we get excited about it. And again, unconsciously, what we're learning is, oh, when I do things well, people seem to like me more. People really love that, and we don't necessarily listen to the words. That's transmitted through our body language, through our facial expressions, through our tone of voice. But that is a drop in a bucket constantly happening. So the first time we see it, let's say a child catches a ball and everyone goes, yay! And so they learn, oh, I caught the ball and everyone got happy. Okay, so when I do things, people get happy. Whereas actually what we're happy about is we're happy about seeing them grow. Yeah. And we're happy because we did something which we couldn't do before. And there's an innate sense of joy in learning when we achieve new things. But the message doesn't get transmitted that we want you to learn, we want you to do well for the sake of joy. Because it's not made explicit enough. And the unconscious learning is, we want you to learn, we want you to do well, we want you to be good at stuff. And that's what will make us love you more. And so if you grow up, and this is so unconscious and so subtle, but it's like a repetitive strain injury or a water torture. If you drop this in regularly, then eventually we just learn, okay, so I'm valuable based on my performance, and also my emotions don't matter that much. And that's quite dangerous. And I see it a lot in schools because we don't know what else to say. Yeah. A lot of the time we don't know how to replace praise, and actually we don't need praise. We think we need praise to make children feel good about what they've done, but that's probably because we're not really experiencing what it means to learn something, which is joy in itself. And we've all experienced that. We all know what it's like to be like, oh, I did that for the first time and I feel great about it. And teachers and parents will see children who have done something well and they'll glow.
Yeah.
But because we tell them that they're good because of it, or we tell them they're amazing or fantastic, or we even act surprised. When we act surprised, we're telling them, I didn't think you could do that, because the unconscious message is, I don't believe you've got the capacity to do things well. So it's a big surprise that you were successful.
Mm.
And yeah, you can see how that's a recipe for
Disaster.
difficulty. But if we use gratitude and questioning, oh, did you enjoy that? You know, the question, if someone does a marathon, the first thing people ask, what was your time?
Oh, yeah.
So that's performance based, isn't it? We're interested in your performance. Whereas if you're changing it up to, oh, how do you feel? Was it fun? Did you enjoy it? And then you can get onto the time because it's still interesting. But the first thing we do tends to be focused on performance.
Mm, true. Yeah. So how do you think, like in the education sector, how could education actually evolve to create a more safer and more fulfilling environment for both students and teachers?
Well, yeah, again, a very big question, and we need to look after our teachers, is the thing I would say first. At the moment, we have a lot of talk about mindfulness in schools and well-being, and a lot of focus. The data would suggest it's not making a huge amount of difference. Um, and we're also often, when I see, and in Plum Village, they'll tell you mindfulness isn't energy, but mindfulness as a practice doesn't exist. So a lot of people get fed up with the word mindfulness. Oh, mindfulness, it doesn't work. Well, of course it doesn't work, because what you've been presented isn't mindfulness. You can have mindfulness of walking, or mindfulness of breathing, or mindfulness of washing your hands, or mindfulness of eating. But mindfulness on its own is not something we do. Um, but at the moment in schools, we have this approach of, well, let's get the children to do some mindfulness, and then maybe they'll feel better. And we're trying to fix the children or give them skills to be calm. But what we're not doing is addressing the conditions which are creating this anxiety, which just seems to permeate everywhere, and this fear. And I better fit in, otherwise things aren't going to work out for me. And of course, this is all playing in the unconscious, so it's very difficult. So the first thing we need to do is look after our teachers and streamline practices in schools, systems and routines based on research, based on evidence, based on what works, based on negative washback. So how much effort are you putting in, and how much does it cost you, and what's the impact of it, and what's the value of it? So that's sort of very practical. We also can actually embody what mastery means in pedagogical terms. Mastery is associated with maths in education, and it's sort of described as master one thing before you move on to the next thing. But there's actually 5 key learning principles behind mastery, the approach, because in the approach of mastery, we recognize, well, we don't master anything. No one ever masters anything. Roger Federer didn't master tennis, even though he became arguably the greatest player. That's debatable, obviously. But the fact that those debates exist, by the way, is another example of performance-based value. Why are we talking about it so much?
True.
But if you want to master something, it's an approach. So it's a process for an outcome. But you're never going to we wouldn't be able to ever describe. And one of the problems we have in schools in assessment is, how do we create rubrics for mastery or for greater depth? And so these things have been created. So once you do this, now you've mastered it, and now you can move on. But actually, it's about key learning theories around playful exploration, around collaborative learning, around constructivism by looking at things from multiple representations, around conceptual underpinning. So, and the beauty of the mastery approach is that it's less workload for teachers when they actually know what mastery is, and it's better outcomes for students. But a bit like mindfulness, mastery has been kind of grabbed by this quick fix culture of, well, let's get something in which fixes everything, because we can't actually sit with difficulty, which I'll come back to. So we need to just get everything fixed, and then we lose the essence of what it actually is. So that will go a long way to promoting actual learning in the classroom, as opposed to doing in the classroom and then having Instead of the actual learning, which creates joy, we have doing, which creates extrinsically praised sugar hit satisfaction.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the mindfulness side. And if we look at a teacher's daily life, it's absurd, really. We've got all this work to do. And a lot of people who outside of teaching will talk about, oh, I've got meetings all day today. It's really difficult when I have meetings all day because I can't get my work done. So teachers have all this work they have to do, like emailing parents, report writing, assessment, all this stuff. But then they have a meeting back to back every day. That's what the lessons are. And that meeting is also a performance because you have to be completely on it to multitask. Yeah. So your energy is completely drained. And it's just very stressful. So actually what we need to do to bring mindfulness into schools is to support teachers to understand what mindfulness means, how to maintain some level of calm in a hectic workplace, which is always going to be hectic. Yeah. So that can't be completely changed. We can try and reduce the workload with certain procedures, better assessment reporting procedures, mastery pedagogical approaches. But also we need teachers to have the actual tools of mindfulness so that we can look after stress. And what that means in practice, in terms of informal practice, well, into all the practice actually, is coming into sensing mode. So we kind of have two modes, the thinking mode and the sensing mode in the body. And we operate in thinking mode pretty much all the time, sometimes known as doing mode. It's the central nervous system, it's the brain going down the spinal column. The sensing mode is the peripheral autonomic nervous system, which is about touch and feel and direct experience through the senses, because everything we experience is sensory and then we translate it to thoughts, and then that triggers off emotions and sensations. So we can help teachers to understand what mindfulness is. We see that this sensory mode works because for children with specific learning difficulties and anxiety, a lot of the treatments and therapies are sensory based. And if we look at various treatments, it's about children doing something sensory. So I know one child who loves just to be in the bath when he's really worked up, just gets in the bath, and it's a sensory experience. It means that the brain can take a break and the body can start to be in contact. And that's possible at all times. And like the drip drop effect of performance-based value and what praise does to children and the unintentional emotional neglect, it accumulates. But there's ways of dropping in to sensing mode throughout the day in informal practice. But in order to achieve those, like taking 5 mindful footsteps, for example, mindful walking is a wonderful practice, which Thích Nhất Hạnh he really sort of advocated for. He would himself would say, well, it was passed on to him, and in the name of interbeing, it's kind of incorrect to separate out who creates these practices, but he certainly brought it to the forefront of meditation and mindfulness. But in order to be able to drop in and use one breath just to calm down, we need a formal practice, which is when you actually sit down for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes and just keep trying to bring your attention back to your breath, back to the movement of the body with the breath. Anything in the senses, body scanning meditation has the same impact, scanning through different parts of the body. But we have this idea of meditation is sitting there and clearing your mind. And it's not really what the mind does, is it? The mind thinks, the bicep bends the arm, they have different jobs. It's where we're placing our attention. And there's a leap of faith with this sort of thing. You have to give it a go for a while to see if it has a benefit. And unfortunately, also when it comes to adults trying meditation, in my experience, they try it like a child who's trying some food they don't really want to eat. And they kind of put a little bit in, no, I don't like it. And then we say, well, you haven't tried it properly, and you get that. So I think to bring mindfulness into schools, we should bring it to the teachers. Okay. And if we do that and encourage the joy of learning through pedagogy, then we won't have to worry about teaching the kids about well-being and anxiety and stress. They shouldn't be thinking about this stuff. We should just be addressing the conditions which create it.
True.
And then when we have to bring in something reactive, we bring it in. But if we use preventative measures, then children don't have to worry about it. Because now we've got children going, oh, I don't feel great, and I'm worried about my well-being now. People keep talking about well-being. I should be worried about this. This seems to be important. So they get the second dart of, okay, so I don't feel great, and I'm also worried about not feeling great.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And because you talk about your mantra, which is I am in perfect health, and how repeating it has actually influenced your own health and mindset. And is this something that you feel that everyone could benefit from?
I do. I believe that everyone would benefit from meditation. I believe it's in as important as exercise and nutrition for our health. And I think one day that will become clearer. But we want, because we're thought based at the moment, we want all the scientific evidence, and there is a lot out there. But the most scientific thing is to test it yourself. The mantra, it's actually a 4-part mantra, which I started to use with my knee injury. And I read a wonderful book called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. And I think it's by Joseph Murphy, but it might be Jacob because I always mix those two names up. But yeah, the idea is that if you say something as if it's true regularly enough, then it becomes true. And the reason this works, and that's been Eckhart Tolle has talked about that. It's mentioned in the Bible in Luke. I think it's 17:19. It's I think don't quote me on that, but it's something like if pray as if you have received, and it shall be done. And I think the scientific explanation of it is that you've got your central nervous system, brain, spinal column, and your peripheral autonomic nervous system, which is the unconscious running of the body. It makes our heart beat. It makes all our organs function. It takes care of the digestive system, the reproductive system, the circulatory system, the respiratory system. When we get a cut, it just creates a scab and puts it over there and then turns that scab back into skin. I mean, that's a miracle, right? When we have a broken bone, the doctors will put it into a cast, but they don't weld the bone together. The body does that itself. The body knows how to heal. And so the idea of using a mantra or an affirmation is based on unleashing the body's potential to heal itself. It depends a lot on the faith because those two parts of the nervous system are connected. So if you can convince your brain that something is true, the body will adapt to it. And so by dropping it in, and actually it was 4 parts, I'm in perfect health, 3 parts. It depends. I don't do it exactly the same every day. A practice needs to be adaptable. It's about rhythm rather than routine, as they say. But I'm in perfect health. I have a pain-free body. I enjoy freedom of movement. And if you tell yourself that enough times and you use the language as if it's happened, you're not asking for it. You're actually saying this has happened. Then all the pulses, all the electric pulses between different neurons and different parts of the nervous system, which is what any activity we do involves, thought activity, physical activity, there's a neural pathway being activated. Of course, the energy that's passing through those neural pathways is the peripheral nervous system, the body is joined to the central nervous system. So that energy feeds in eventually. And if the faith is really, really strong, the faith is the thing that makes the difference. And that's why in the book it explains people have had miracle healing experiences all over the world at the feet of statues and at the feet of gurus, because they completely believed it would happen. Their body went, oh, that's the truth. My body will adapt to it. But the key is doing it at a time when that connection is open. And unfortunately, we blocked ourselves. We block ourselves with what we consume mentally, with what we consume physically. Sugar is very problematic. Our posture's not right, so our spinal column's arched, so the nervous system's not functioning cleanly. So at the end, so the first thing in the morning, last thing before bed, when that body's in that kind of sleepy state and you're not conscious and your mind hasn't overridden everything yet, and you haven't started saying that you should or shouldn't do things, or things are right or wrong or good or bad, that's a good time to drop in something that you want as if you have it. And then you cultivate the sense in your body as well of like, oh, I wonder what it would be like just to be able to say to people, my knee's completely fine. I'm in
Mm,
perfect health. Everything feels great. I've got no pain in my body and I do whatever I want with my body. I
mm,
sit in half lotus when I want to. I can run, I can swim, I can play football, I can do anything I want to do with my body. You imagine, you really visualize what's that like, and you feel the experience in your body. Again, the challenge is a lot of us don't feel that much into our body, which is why the practice of coming back to our body throughout the day and informal practices helps. But
mm.
dropping those mantras in or affirmations first thing at morning, last thing at night, and at the end of meditations, when you're in that calm state, then it feeds through into the body. And I've had incredible healing from that practice.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And you also mentioned experiencing minor miracles and finding peace. So, what were some of these moments and how did they shape your journey?
Um, well, I suppose I went on a bike ride. Um, I went on a bike ride for 5 days from north of Spain into France. A few summers ago, I was very sad. I was a little bit heartbroken. Um,
Mhm.
and a friend of mine and his family were going to south of France. So why don't you come? So okay, I'll come. So I went out and I bought a bike. Luckily, I had some savings, and I was reckless. So I went out and just bought a bike and I cycled across. And for quite a long time, probably it was a 5 day ride. It was about 100k each day until the fifth day was a bit shorter. And I think on the third day, my mind stopped thinking
Mm.
quite so much, and I was aware of all these sunflowers that I was cycling past, and I was like, there's so many of them, and they were all just trying to get to the sun, but they had really heavy heads. They probably had pesticides and things. They're probably not quite naturally growing, and I was like, and I realized they were just like me.
Mhm.
Um, and I was telling a friend about it shortly after. I was like, oh, this is so nice. I felt peace in that moment, just recognizing that what they're doing is the same as what I'm doing, just trying our hardest to live and flourish. And, you know, that there's this energy in all living things which just wants to flourish and grow. And I was talking to a Christian friend of mine about it, and she said, oh, that's what we call the Holy Spirit. And I was like, interesting. I didn't realize that. Um, and then I had some other experiences in meditation where I started to realize that I'm not my body, because if that changes, I'm still me, and I'm not my mind, because even if I lose my mind, and people often say that, you know, obviously there's very sad cases with Alzheimer's and dementia, where people say they're not the same person anymore, but we still go to visit them. So there's something about that person which is the same. Um, and I'm not my emotions because they keep coming and going and changing. So what really am I? And I, through the teachings of sort of like Muji and various yogis, there's this idea, well, I'm the awareness of all these things. And I was in meditation and I had this sense of I am aware of all this stuff in front of me now. I was like, whoa, what just happened? You know, because I've been sitting down trying to meditate for long times, and in this particular occasion, I was there and I could suddenly sense and get a very felt sense, which didn't need any mental justification, that, okay, so I'm conscious of all this experience which is happening in front of me. And actually, this consciousness that I'm now sitting in is the same as everybody else's consciousness. So there was this sense of merging.
Mm.
And I started to develop this idea of what people call God or the universe, or, you know, there's different words for it. And again, I asked my friend and I said, why do they personify God in Christianity? Because to me, it's a thing, it's a what
Mm.
rather than a who. And she said it was about representing the caring nature of God. And I was like, okay, so I haven't really experienced that consciously, although I didn't, what I can see now in hindsight, I was experiencing a lot of care from the way life's circumstances, which is another way of saying God in my mind, led me to situations. But I went to Plum Village and I knew the practice quite well. So I was able to fully commit into each meditation. And it's much easier to do that when you're in a meditation hall with, you know, 5 other lay people and like 5 monks. So it's like, okay, so I'm going to do my meditation now. I'm not going to think about what I'll do afterwards, or, you know, make my little to-do list, or come up with excuses why I can stop now because I've got a bit of an achy pain. I'll do longer tomorrow, and all the common excuses for getting up. And then these little things started to happen. So one example was I was in a group of about 40 people in a Dharma sharing, and throughout the session, 2 of the people had said something that really resonated with me, and I thought to myself, I'd like to go and thank them for their contributions afterwards. But I also knew that I wanted to get back down to my section of the retreat for the walking meditation, which I'd missed the day before, and it had been requested that I come back because we were a smaller part of the community. So I thought to myself, do you know what? I'll leave it. I won't bother saying thank you. I'll just experience the gratitude. Who am I doing it for anyway? Am I actually thanking them, or do I just want them to perceive me as grateful? So I sort of left it, but I had this intention, I'd like to thank them. Then I let it go. And then at the end of the session, the guy that I wanted to say thank you to walked over to me to start a conversation about something completely separate. And I was like, oh, wow, that was a coincidence. And then everyone else left. And while I was talking to him, getting a little bit worried about being late, but knowing that he came over, and if it comes to you, the book, the theory, all the, you know, the texts say when it comes to you naturally, it's meant for you. Mm. And I've read that, and again, in various different representations from various different times in history and places in the world. And then while I was talking to him, the lady who I'd wanted to say thank you to also walked back into the room, and I was just left in the room with these 2 people out of 40. I was just thinking, that is just a wonderful thing. And at the time I was calling it manifestations, but I also know that the theory of manifestation is have an intention, think about it, take any actions you need to, let it go, and it will come to you. And so I was like, well, that fitted that pattern. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened the next day. I wanted to know the name of a book, and someone came over and started a conversation with me, and without even asking the name of the book, he told me the name of the book in this conversation, and I was like, it's another one. And that was happening. I filled up a whole notebook of events and experiences and insights from 2 weeks. And that thing was happening all the time. And I was like, whoa, okay, these are minor miracles. And then bigger miracles started, because I, in that time, realized my passion is still education, even though I was burnt from it. And what I want to do is I'd like to explore the Christian spirituality, which I've started to become interested in. Because I've done a lot in Buddhism and a lot in the yogic world. But I also want to have some time, chunks of time in schools where I can cultivate my vision for a education which includes some form of spiritual practice in a scientific way. And then I want to become a consultant, and I want to train how to deliver mindfulness coaching and breathwork and meditation to others. And the day I left Plum Village, I got a voice message inviting me to go to India to go and volunteer in a Christian boarding school for 5 months. And I literally said in my head, I want 4 or 5 month placements in schools. Going straight into consultancy might not be enough, because I won't be able to see the depths of the school. I want to be in the school. And that happened the day I left. So I got the opportunity to explore the Christian representation of spiritual truth. And I got practice I wanted in a school, in a very unique school context. And while I was there, I got an invitation again, so it all came to me, inviting me to another school for 5 months in Thailand. And I went there, and there in the classroom, I was able to really apply the practice of applied engaged mindfulness with children in a very joyful and nourishing way. So these things again, they kept happening very naturally for me. And then I was like, okay, so there does seem to be some correlation at least between me sitting still for long periods of time or even regular periods of time and the things that I want to happen happening.
Interesting. Yeah. And it
And
just, oh, sorry, carry on.
no, so it just you asked about peace. So I know I talk a lot. It's very engaging for me.
Yeah.
Um, when you one of Thich Nhat Hanh's quotes, which a Vietnamese brother shared with me in Plum Village, was when you know you're on the right path, you have nothing left to fear. And having that deep, profound experience and the felt knowing from the body of I don't actually need to convince anyone of any of this stuff because I know what's happened in my life and I know the timing of these things is immaculate.
Mm.
So I'm not afraid anymore. And I still get nervous and I still get anxious about things, but I'm conditioned that way. But I know how to manage it, and I know that I'm going to be taken care of. Everything's going to be just fine. And with that comes peace, because there's trust and there's faith and there isn't a need to know everything, and there's
Exactly.
peace in that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Do you think that applies to everybody? Because I fully believe in that. You know, we trust in the process, and which is why I just think it's just so life-changing when you can just surrender. Yeah, just surrender to the universe. Do you think that would apply for everybody?
I do.
Mm.
I can't know that, but
Mm.
there is no reason to believe that there's anything special about me or unusual in terms of human experience.
Mm.
Um, and I wouldn't say that I've done any of the stuff that I've done. The stuff that's given me peace has been presented to me, the things that I've become skilled at or knowledgeable about, and I base that on the feedback I've had from the people who have, been involved with these practices, particularly in education, is that I've been effective. I'm very reluctant to use the word good, but I've been very effective at creating peaceful, safe environments, at learning progress, learning new things, at managing conflict, and at cultivating a sense of peace and joy actively. Those things all came to me. So, I didn't really choose education as a career, and I certainly didn't choose mindfulness or meditation as a practice. So I was the most skeptical of people when it came to anything spiritual growing up. I first went to a yoga class just because I was getting hurt playing football.
Mm.
So I do believe that I'm a human, and I think humans, yes, we will have differences, but fundamentally we operate in the same ways. But the conditions aren't set up, and I was very lucky to be able to be in the position to take 6 months off work. I had to choose to sacrifice and let go of my life savings. Um, but I had some life savings, which enabled me 6 months of unpaid work, in fact, 12 months of unpaid work. And I had to, adapt my lifestyle and basically let go of most of my belongings now. And, the last, I don't know how many months, I've got a backpack and I've got a little mindfulness bell and I've got some notebooks and I've got a few things. I've got a guitar now, and I have some stuff in storage, but I'm living without most of it. Um, so I do think it's relevant for everybody and true for everybody, but it's not easy to access. And that's why yoga and breath work are my passions, because they help us access meditation and then we get to see the power of stillness and the healing that happened.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And you also have a powerful phrase, which is I unsubscribe from all. Can you explain what that means and how it's influenced your own life?
I unsubscribe. That's from a Arcade Fire song, and it's a great album. It's called We. Highly recommended it. A little plug for Arcade Fire. And I haven't listened to an album which has caught my attention so much for such a long time. And one of the songs is I Unsubscribe. And I was
Mm.
like, yeah, I unsubscribe. I'm not going to just, there's so many rules out there, unwritten rules, written rules, should not, must not, too much, too little, always and nevers. These words or bells of mindfulness for me about, okay, there's so many things that we just automatically attach a value to, a sense of good or bad to, instead of just observing what is actually happening. So this is happening. Anger is happening. Okay, so that's happening. I don't have to get angry about anger, and I don't have to blame anyone about it. So I unsubscribe from all these conditions and joining in with a set of expectations that led me to great suffering because I was trapped. And a massive hallmark of depression is a feeling of being trapped, and as well as being isolated. And there's too many rules, and that's one of the reasons why kids are getting so anxious, because they can't keep up with it. And they're just constantly being told you should be like this. And the rules change day to day, person to person.
Yeah.
And they're just like, what is going on here? I don't know. I just keep on getting told stuff. So yeah,
Wow.
I'm a bit belligerent, maybe even.
I
If there
love
was such a thing as belligerence, which of course there's not, because that's another rule.
Oh, rules. I love that. Yeah, I've always been a rule breaker, and I've just never really understood why we need so many rules, you know? It's like it just now, in the education system, like, why do they still have to sit, and not talk? And,
Mm.
it's just not natural, is it?
Well, and also in one classroom, they might be told be quiet a lot. I remember hearing one child was asked, "What's the most important thing about school?" And they said, "Being quiet." And that
Oh,
was a great power about the unconscious learning, because no one would have said the most important thing's being quiet, but they heard it enough times to believe that that was the truth. But you go to another classroom, and she said, "No, I want talk. I want collaboration." So then,
yeah.
what's the child left with? Which teacher do I believe here? What's going on? And how come that teacher wanted quiet one day and then the next day was shouting? Because shouting's not quiet. So I don't understand that either.
No, I
Yeah,
don't.
it's a lot of expectations and inconsistencies and
There
rules.
is. Oh goodness, yeah. So, can you share how you integrate subconscious work into daily life for ongoing transformation?
Can you repeat that question? How do I translate subconscious work?
How do you integrate subconscious work into daily life?
I guess listening is the first thing that comes up.
Okay.
I listen, and I try and listen through, like in the non-violent communication model, I try and listen to um, what people are feeling, particularly children. What is their actual experience, the relevant experience? What's their feeling experience, and what do they need?
Mm,
And I try and use eye contact quite consciously, because I find that children aren't completely filled up with rules yet, and they respond very much to um, to eye contact, and you can communicate a lot of care with the way you look at a child, and by looking at them with interest. Um, you don't have to necessarily empathy is like not knowing what someone else's situation is. It's the intention to know. That's a non-violent communication little golden nugget. And so being curious and looking at people with curiosity um, is something I do to subconsciously communicate, particularly with children and animals, which is less effective sometimes. But I tend to find I have a good relationship with animals because, again, they're predominantly instinctive beings.
Yeah.
They can connect to a sense. But in order to do that, I guess what I have to do is I come back into my sensory experience. How do I feel now in my body? And
Mm,
actually, I think it's Dr. Joe Dispenza who says that the body is the subconscious store. So
mm,
coming back into the body and recognizing, okay, how am I feeling here? And if I want this person to think that I'm genuinely interested in them,
yeah.
I need to be genuinely interested in them. I
Mm,
can't just try and trick them with my eyes. I need to have a genuine interest. And in order to have a genuine interest in them, I need to not be suffering or stressed or worried myself. And in order to not be suffering or stressed or worried myself, I need to be able to feel what that emotion is doing in my body, breathe with it, recognize that as much as I don't like it, that is just a physical experience and
mm,
it's going to go. And so as I come into my body, the subconscious mind, I recognize what's there. Oh, okay, I'm angry. Oh, I want to correct that. I don't want that person to suffer. I want them to feel better. I want to say something now which will make them like me more. I
mm,
try and recognize all those things and see what it does in my body, which is often a tightening in the chest. And go, okay, that's tightening in the chest. What do I really want to do? I
mm,
really want to have connection with the person in front of me. So I'm going to recognize, shift to one side, and then bring my attention back to the person there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow, thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's just the importance of just being so self-aware. I just feel like with that comes when you are silent, when you're
Mm,
sat in stillness,
mm.
even it doesn't have to be for hours on end, does it? As just starting off like a few minutes a day
Yeah,
be
start
helpful.
small. Atomic Habits, is
Oh,
wonderful, wonderful practice and book. Just start small, build momentum. But
yeah.
yeah, stillness and silence is you can't. We it's so hard the first time. It's so hard to start with. But if you're trying to watch something on the telly, you wouldn't be waving your head around. If you're trying
Yeah.
to keep a close eye on something, you wouldn't be moving very much. When you get to stillness, then you can start to see, and over time, you're like, oh my gosh, my body does that, and oh, anger, I didn't realize that. And that's another thing that happened in Plum Village. I didn't realize that this wasn't my face with a frown
Yeah.
until I went about after 4 days. I looked in the mirror, I was like, I've got wrinkles. And the reason they would look like wrinkles is because the frown had gone and I had a smooth, what's it called? The triangle of sadness. It was smooth and I could just see the lines where I'd been frowning for so long.
Oh, wow.
Um, but yeah, the stillness is where you start to notice that everything you do is a sensory experience.
Yeah. Wow. And I know that you have a lot of amazing Zen books, that you read and that you can also recommend. But one of them that stands out for me is No Mud, No Lotus.
Mm.
Um, so what does that book and even that phrase, what does that mean to you, and how has it actually influenced your own approach to challenges in life?
Yeah, no mud, no lotus. Wonderful, wonderful teaching. And it's the ability to manage suffering. It's the art of suffering. Because when we suffer, and we don't teach this in schools, we teach people not to suffer, but we don't teach people how to suffer. When we suffer, we have to then get into a control. We get afraid and we have to try and control. Um, and then and we lose awareness of what's going on, and then we pass on our suffering in unconscious ways because we never pass on stuff that we know we're passing on. We only pass on the stuff we're not aware of. So suffering closes us up. Um, and no mud, no lotus is basically the same as every cloud has a silver lining. That every difficulty that we've had is an opportunity. It sounds like such a cliche, the word opportunity, but it's not even an opportunity, a necessity for the good things.
Yeah.
Um, and the principle being, the actual analogy is a lotus doesn't grow without mud at the bottom of the pond. It has to be a very muddy, murky pond in order for the lotus flower to stem up from the mud and then to blossom. Um, and of course, in my life, yeah, there was bullying um, and for a long time I was the victim of that, and I suffered that, and that wasn't fair, and it shouldn't have happened. And right, in some ways, I could say, yeah, it wasn't fair, and it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. But I
Mm.
have a great, great passion for education and for helping young people, and I've become effective at it. And I wouldn't have become effective at it if I didn't know what it was like to suffer, and I wouldn't have this passion for education if my own primary school experience hadn't been quite so. And there was nothing against the school, so I'm hoping any listeners out there who are affiliated with that school won't panic. But it was my experience of it which was unpleasant,
Mm.
and that has given me purpose. And yeah, it's very hard to find purpose out of the death of a friend, for example. But
Mm.
at least I can choose to live as well as I possibly can while I'm here, because I do not know how long that will be. And so there is a lotus in that. Um, it doesn't feel like it offsets the mud in that case, but I'm only human, so I can't see as deeply as maybe Thich Nhat Hanh can, who was only human as well, but he practiced meditation every day for 90 years. Um, so I think that's, yeah, for me, particularly the suffering, the depression, the anxiety. I know what it's like, and that puts me in a position to be able to help. So that's a no mud, no lotus. Yeah, and it means that when new suffering comes, increasingly I can go, huh, I wonder what this has got for me now. This is going to be unpleasant for a while, but if I go back to the practice, I know, because it's always happened with every mud in the past, that there will be a lotus at some point. And the more I go back to the practice, the time distance between finding the lotus seems to get shorter and shorter. But
Wow, beautiful, yeah. And it's true, you can't really have the happiness unless you have the sadness.
well, yeah, I mean that's very Taoist, isn't it? The polarities actually, if just conceptually,
Mm,
we wouldn't be able to conceive of happiness if sadness didn't also exist.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Alex. Wow, it's been such an honor having you on and just your amazing wisdom and insights that you have to share. I can already see your book being an absolute bestseller.
Oh well, let's hope so. Let's hope it has some meaning for people. And if it doesn't, then something else maybe
So
will.
be it.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. So, how can my listeners connect with you, work with you?
Yeah, well, so I have a fledgling Instagram page called Breathe Yourself Alive. So you can follow on Breathe Yourself Alive, and obviously you can message me on there. Um, and educationally, I'm building a website at the moment. So the website's not ready yet, but it's called Projects for Peace. It's projects-for-peace.com. So that will hopefully be ready in the next few weeks. And yeah, my educational email, which is what I have at the moment, is ajteducation@project-for-peace.com. So I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to collaborate. Absolutely.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll add all the links in this podcast episode.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that is all we have the time for today, my beautiful people. I hope you enjoyed the show. And Alex, again, it's been amazing having you on. I've really enjoyed this chat. Thank you so
Thank,
much.
thanks for having me.
Brilliant. And my beautiful listeners, connect with us if you have any questions about this episode. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you on the next show.